Hey, everybody. I'm so excited that we can be together today. I know we're all getting ready for Easter, and we're certainly praying for you as we head into Good Friday and then into Easter. But I got to tell you, I'm super excited about our topic today, too. And part of it's because of what we experience on Easter. I'm super excited, too, about the guest that we have, my good friend Chuck Tate, who pastors Rock Church in East Peoria, Illinois. Chuck, thank you for taking time to be with us.
Hey, thank you so much, Pastor Jim. Love Significant Church Network. Love you, appreciate you, and the way that you help pastors like me.
Well, it's great to be a part of a network for me that's of the pastor, by the pastor, for the pastor per se. I told Tamara after our conference this year, I said, I don't think I've ever hosted that many people and came away refreshed. Usually whenever you're hosting a lot of people, you come away pretty tired. But because it's their friendships and their people care about each other's families and each other's ministries and I mean we're growing. It's not like we've all known each other for 20 years, but some of us have, and because relationships are growing like that, it's just been a joy for me. And people watching today, significant church. Nobody's compensated for what we do. People do it because they really care about God's call in your life, and not just God's call on well, God's calling your life because it's to impact the nations. We want to see great churches in every neighborhood of every nation. That's the vision of Significant Church. And we want to see pastors not living isolated, but we want to see them living strong, joyful, happy lives because of how they're investing in each other. So thank you for being with us, Chuck. I couldn't wait for today because you have a considerable online presence. You've done a fantastic job with that. And
Thank you.
really, my goal today is to leave people with a thought, you know what, he did it, and I can too. So I'm looking forward to them hearing from you. I'm going to share some thoughts that have motivated me to pursue a hybrid model because it's work. Honestly, it's like adding a service when you decide, probably even a little more than that, right? When you decide we're gonna really be good at being online too. But it's been a joy because that service has reached people and that service has served people that were already a part of our family at a higher capacity. So, I mean, I'll talk about how, from my perspective, online ministry is here to stay. And it's because at the end of the day, it gives us the ability to pastor more people, and it gives us the ability to pastor people better. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, while there's no substitute for the power of gathering in person, I firmly believe digital platforms are not in competition with the church, but they are a tool for the church. So we know Jesus used boats and mountainsides. He used dinner tables to reach people where they were. And now we get to use live streams, Instagram Reels, TikTok, webinars, podcasts. It's the same message, but different methods. So, Pastor Jim, one of the core values of our church is simply a phrase that's four words: same message, different language. We want to communicate the gospel with love in a way that people can understand. And sometimes that means we have to be willing to change our methods or to find new methods. So when it comes to digital media, it's simply a new method to preach the same message. So what I've noticed is most of the criticism that comes about online ministry usually comes from a place of people wanting depth, or they want to force people to gather in person. And I get that, but I see digital media as the new window of the church. It's where people peek inside. And I know you've probably experienced this as well, but many of our first time guests will tell us that they drove by. I'll ask them, how did you end up at Rock Church? And they'll say, well, I drove by several times, but I started watching online. I've been watching online for weeks, sometimes months, and I finally was willing to give it a chance and to step inside. Or perhaps they've seen a clip of me on TikTok or Instagram, just throwing out a heaping of hope, speaking to people's pain, and eventually connects with somebody. So it's a digital on-ramp.
Yeah, that's fantastic. The reality is that what people feel on the competition side, it is real. There's been a proliferation of parachurch ministries in you and I's lifetime. Like if you look at how many there were, 50 years ago versus now, there's been a proliferation of them. And if you look at Giving USA, I think it's called, 54% of people's charitable giving when I started pastoring went to the church. Now it's 27% of their charitable giving. So I understand people's concerns. I really do. And I've even watched podcasts and I've watched webinars of people who treat digital church like it's totally church. And I'm not trying to judge that. I'm just saying to people, we understand you have legitimate concerns. And we're not really trying to talk you into something that is that doesn't honor the gathered church, because we both have gathered churches and we believe in gathered churches. Today, I think what we really want to do is help you think through maybe how you can serve your gathered church better, because they're on the move quicker than they've ever been, and also how you can reach some new people through the tool. I know when we started years ago, I bought time on ABC locally for the very reason that I wanted to give people a window into our church. And I had taken over a church that was 10 years old, had 200 people, had been through a couple splits, and it would kind of split and come back. And I just wanted them to know it was a different church. There's, something new was starting. So I think that there's a lot of people that, a lot of people would say that your online platform now is the first visit, more than people visiting you at your church. So I think it is real important. And I think as we talk today, so many of you are going to feel the same way. As we get started, I already said that nobody's compensated. None of the pastors are in Significant Church. We do it out of love of our hearts, but it doesn't mean we don't have some bills. We do. We have coordinators and we have other things that cost about $250,000, and we're so grateful for our sponsor churches, and we're so grateful for sponsoring organizations. And we like to always give them a shout out. There's one called Ministry Chicks, and it's a ministry that helps women in ministry serve with confidence and skill so they become people of great impact. They've been very valuable to us at Faith Family Church, and perhaps they can be valuable to you in developing some of the ladies on staff who deal with some unique issues. So if you want to check them out, you can check them out at ministrychick.com. So here's a question I want to start with. I've been waiting to ask you this. What do you think the expectation and desires are of people who come to us through a digital platform?
Well, I think people are, the one thing that I've always noticed is people respond to being encouraged. And so digital ministry is not just about pushing content, but it's about connecting, which is what pastoring is all about. It's about connecting with people. And that has to start with empathy. So when someone watching online or they're scrolling through social media, they're not just looking for information, they're longing for a connection. They want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be valued. So I believe people those who are receiving ministry online are looking for three things. One, authenticity. They don't need polished, they need real. I'm not saying we shouldn't be professional, we should, but we have to be willing to be vulnerable. So whether it's a message, a reel, a story, if we're vulnerable and real, we're going to build trust. So authenticity. Second thing is hope. So in a world full of noise and negativity, and there are all kinds of voices out there, people are looking for something that's going to encourage them, something that's going to lift them up. So it goes beyond just information for them. I think sometimes myself, I've been guilty of just throwing out information, and instead of communicating to the person who's scrolling, to give them the hope that I have. The gospel is good news. So they want to know that God sees them and still has a plan for them. So second thing is hope. Third thing is accessibility. Whether it's a single mom watching in the middle of the night or somebody who is sitting in their truck on their lunch break, they want truth delivered in a way that's relatable. I think bite-sized is more effective, and we want to create streams where it's easy for people to engage with us. I guess the one thing that shifted everything for me was a few years ago. I was listening to a podcast by Carey Nieuwhof. It was the Leadership podcast, and he was interviewing Rick Warren, and Rick was talking about his getting ready to transition and retire from ministry. But he said one thing that jumped out at me more than anything else, and that was this: if you will speak to people's pain, you're always going to connect with somebody, because
That's really,
everybody, yeah,
that's
yeah.
really, yeah.
So yeah, everybody's either they're in a storm, getting ready to go into a storm, or they're coming out of storm. So even somebody who might not feel pain today, eventually they're going to go through life because life is hard, and they're going to need some hope.
That's really, really good. And if you catch them with hope, then once they are convinced that you might have some answers for them, they can always go to your page and they can, like, I didn't plan on telling you this, but I got a message on Messenger the other day from a gal who lived here, African American gal, and she told me how painful her childhood was and how she stumbled into our church. And she said, what you said just connected with me. So she said, I moved to Dallas, and she just profiled. I mean, I really admire her, because she went to college. She did a lot of hard things that her family had never done. And so she messages me back and says, I just want you to know I give you the credit because when I stumbled into your church, I knew that you knew what you were talking about. So she said, all of these years I've been watching you online. She said, wherever I was, I'd come home and I'd watch you online. And she said
Wow.
it built a whole new constitution. I mean, now she's a successful woman. She's married. She has kids. And I'm sitting here like bawling, saying to Tamara, "Look at this." And I don't know this lady. If she walked in my office, I think I'd recognize her. But it's the power the gospel has. And I didn't catch her online, so the testimony isn't about catching her online. But that's what you're talking about. That
Yeah.
we can catch people in just an instant. And I think one of the things for me that we did online early because I had some young guys on staff and I didn't want to act so old, but I had some of those same thoughts of, okay, is it going to make people gather less? And you know what, maybe it does, but I also have guys that work 2 on 2 off in the oil field and they can't gather. So I thought, well, this is cool that would give them a chance to gather with their family and hear the same message even though they're not physically present. And then during COVID, I watched because my wife has something called the Awaken Prayer Group. And God motivated it from Jeremiah 9, where it says, now you women hear the word of the Lord, open your ears to the words of his mouth, teach your daughters how to wail and how to lament, because death has climbed through our windows. It has entered our fortresses. It has removed our children from the streets. I think about that. I used to plant a maple tree that was 3 feet from the road. My mother was inside, not even thinking about me. But evil has kind of changed the whole climate of our country and young men from the public squares. And anyway, so Tamara got that scripture. And during COVID, I would watch my daughter, who was with us, connecting with the ladies online in that prayer group. And I thought, this is beautiful because these women are not going to make time to do it without using the online presence. And then I saw how much she was getting help from other ministries online. And I just realized, you know what, this is something we need to give ourselves to, especially because we were also all reading stats too during that time, right? So we were reading about how 50% of our people were waiting until things would be normal until they came back. And I think it was like 45% weren't sure what they were going to do because sitting at home watching it online seemed like a pretty good deal to some of them. And you're processing all this information. And where I came to was I realized that really it didn't matter what I think. What matters is what the people I was trying to minister to thought. So tell me your thoughts on leveraging online influence to connect with people that you would never connected with if you hadn't made the decision to leverage your online capabilities.
Yeah, well, I love that. I love that scripture and how awakened prayer groups came to be, and I think that passage is another reason why we just have to be present with the gospel. So if we don't, in other words, if we don't intentionally occupy that space with truth, hope, prayer, somebody else is going to fill that void, and they already are. So the whole reason I even got on TikTok was during COVID. My kids were on TikTok, and I was just very intrigued, and I wanted to. I mean, I trusted them, but I still wanted. I've heard a lot of stuff about TikTok, and I wanted to get on and check it out myself. And I saw there was a lot of good content and some people using the platform to preach the gospel. And I decided to create an account and was doing some fun videos with my kids. I mean, I was doing cooking videos. We were scaring each other, lip syncing, all kinds of everything you could think of.
Yeah, we're all doing that dance, right? You remember that dance?
Yes.
Everybody was
Yeah. And
doing?
I
Yeah.
can't dance, which made it great. But
Well, my kids told me to stay out of one, so don't feel bad.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think there was one video. My kids were much younger. We were in the car and we had on this Christian praise song, worship song. I don't even know what it was. And we were just lip syncing it, but it looked like we were singing it and we were all into it. And it kind of went viral. And I realized in that moment, wow, this is a different platform. And the algorithms have changed today, but TikTok was unlike Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, which is now X. It was just it seemed to be easier to extend your reach, so to speak. And things took off. And I tried to get my kids to do more of those, and they were like, "No, Dad, no." They didn't want to do it with me. So I decided to kind of find my niche, so to speak. And I realized that whenever I was intentional about sharing hope, that people responded. So I know that my own kids have been impacted by great content from parachurch ministries and Christian creators, So we're not in competition with other churches and ministries. Team Jesus is alive and well. And I think it's important not to view what we're talking about today as online ministry is not just a side hustle, it's a front line. So just like your wife Tamara's group is a beautiful example of what happens when we bring intercession into that space. So let's not just watch the windows, but let's speak into them. Let's use our platform. Let's use our voice, because everybody that's watching today, you have a voice, you have something to share, and people need it.
Yeah, well, I would encourage people to really see social media like you do your children's program, your youth program. It's one more way that you can minister to a whole lot of people. My children's ministry doesn't minister to everybody, right? My youth ministry doesn't minister to everybody, but it's vital to families. And today we can minister to people in ways that just make us so much stronger when we do social media. And here's something that people may not understand, that like YouTube is the second largest search platform in the world. So it's second only to Google. So when you start putting your stuff up on YouTube, the access that it that it has to people is just ginormous. And so for you, you're ahead of me, which is, I like to have people on this broadcast that are ahead of me. But talk to me about, okay, so you started experiment with TikTok and doing different things. And talk to me about how you began to access a broader audience through the stuff that you did.
I realized that, and I'm still learning, by the way. I'm not the expert. I just realized that content gets attention, connection builds trust, consistency changes lives. So I would say number one, start with value, not just visibility. We don't post just to post. I want to share something that's going to help people, whether it's hope or whether it's truth, encouragement, clarity, whatever it is. Because when somebody who's watching, when they're scrolling, when they feel seen or helped by what you post, then they'll lean in and they'll want more. Second thing I would say is to engage more than you broadcast. So I'm not just gonna, and I have been guilty at doing the opposite of that. Sometimes I'm just trying to post every day to post every day, and I've had to slow down and make sure that I am engaging, that I am taking the time to connect with people. I'm taking the time to respond to comments. And if somebody sends me a DM, I want to take the time to send them a message back, especially when they're hurting, they're broken. And this is why, like, I don't know if I've shared this yet, but I do a live TikTok Bible study every Thursday night. So tonight, 9 p.m. to
Wow.
10, it's usually an hour and 15 minutes. And sometimes I add other people to it. I have a co-host and one of the other pastors on our staff, to where, she helps monitor and engage. And we have people, like, it's become a community. And obviously we want to lead people to find a local church to get connected to and to gather in person so they can have a support system that's near them. But some of these people, they haven't done that and they're just scrolling, laying in bed, sitting in their living room, scrolling. And now I can just even, I've learned some names. There's a woman named Greta. She's an older woman from Ohio. She's there every Thursday night. There's this woman named Kim from New Mexico, and Leah from Colorado. We have a friend from Kenya who used to be a part of our church. So now she feels like she's connecting every week. And just within a couple months ago, we had the opportunity to stop and to lead somebody to Jesus during a Bible study on TikTok. So it's important to engage, not just to broadcast, but to engage and use storytelling. We know that Jesus did this, so we want to speak to people's pain with scripture, but personal story is what I've noticed that really connects. When I'm vulnerable, when I start talking about the struggles that my wife had physically and how it impacted me, how it impacted our kids, that always seems to connect people. So number 4, be present and be personal.
That's really powerful, and that's really good. I heard somebody say this, and I thought it was really good. And they said, when you think about going online, don't think about trying to be the next person with a worldwide platform and influence. Instead, think about being there for the people who your voice is going to connect with them and help them. So, and they said there's a lot more people in your community that your voice can be helping than what you realize. And that if you'll make a commitment to master using social media, what you'll find out is there are people just right in your own town that you could be reaching that you're not reaching because you didn't set aside that time. And so they said, so don't even think about, and I think some guys do, they think, well, if I do this, then I'm going to compare my social media content to some person, Andy Stanley, or some person with a massive, online presence. But that's really not what it's all about. It's really the woman at the well. It's the person you connect with that somebody wouldn't have connected with if you didn't take the time to care deeply enough about her. So I think for some people that might kind of speak to them today. And you've said this already, maybe not directly, but you kind of said indirectly that it's not how much money you put into cameras and lights either, because people like the fact that it's personal. It's an easy medium. If you have a cell phone and you're sensitive to lighting, you can do a pretty good job, right?
Right, right, exactly. And when I'm doing webinars and things like this, I'd like to have nicer equipment. But when it comes to connecting with people, like what we're talking about, using digital media, there are people that aren't doing it because I've had people say, I don't have a good enough camera. I'm like, use your phone. I use my phone. I built my TikTok audience significantly. I mean, I think it was up to close to 100,000 followers, and it was simply from posting hope consistently. And I used my iPhone, and a lot of times, later on, I ended up buying a little clip-on mic, but most of the time I don't even use that because it's a hassle. What I usually do is I go on a 2-mile run, and then I have this cove in my neighborhood and I set up my phone on a ledge, and I just do the video on my phone, and then I edit it. I add subtitles, sometimes add music backgrounds, but yeah, you don't have to have any equipment but your phone. That's really all you need. There are some apps that can help make things here and there, but ultimately it's just setting up your phone and talking to somebody and giving them hope. Obviously, we have the best news that anybody can have, and people respond to it. In fact, people have stopped to say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I've had the opportunity to tell people in my neighborhood, like, it looks like that guy's talking to himself. And in fact, there was a woman that was invited to our church, and by a friend, and she started describing me, and then she's like, "Hey, you'll like our pastor in our church." And she's giving her information, and she showed her picture of me, and the lady's like, "Oh my gosh, I know who he is. He's in my neighborhood. He's always like dancing by the by the river." Yeah, and she came. She's like, I've got to come. I love those messages he shares. So, yeah, you never know.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Well, I wanted to start just by talking about why, because, especially for people that maybe they just feel like, hey, that's a younger pastor's thing, or somebody thinks I'm too busy, So I'm going to start with the why. And I love some of the things you said, and that is people are always going to listen when you connect with their pain. So be authentic, be helpful. I love what you said about how content will make people think and consistency will start changing their life. I love those lines that you shared. Let's kind of shift gears for a second. Let's talk about two things. Number one, how do we increase traction in our community? How do we do it well so we increase traction? And then how do we multiply connection in our church family? Because I really do see those as two different things that I've seen things, for instance, like next steps. Why not do it online? You know, prayer groups. Why not do them online when everybody's so busy? So it does increase the connection of people, but it also increases our traction in our community. So talk to me about increased traction. How do we start creating that within our through our social media?
I think one of the answers is we need to be approachable. So if we're going to do this, my goal is not to preach at people. My goal is to talk to them. I want to use language that feels real. So not like pastoral, if that makes sense, but like a friend. Like I've already mentioned, I'm letting people know that I see them, and if they feel like it's real, then they'll be willing to open up. I received a lot of DM messages from people just from being approachable, even from those who push back. And like I have guys send me a message, well, I'm an atheist, I'm this, I'm that, and hit me hard, and just me taking the time to respond. I've noticed a shift and change where um, I've been able to pray with somebody who came at me and it ended with me just praying with them and them apologizing to me by how they acted. So I think we need to be approachable. Consistency is really important for me when I was building, um, really intentional about building my presence. Um, it was consistency was the key. I couldn't just, you know, post a video once a month. And there was about a year that I posted almost every day, which means I had to schedule it. I had to think about it. I wrote some things down. So I wanted to be consistent, and I've noticed I'm not as consistent. Life gets busy, ministry's busy. We get that, and I noticed that I've when I'm not consistent, I'm losing traction. So
Yeah.
I want to be more consistent. I want to keep showing up. So
So let me ask you a question.
yeah.
What's consistency look like to you? How many posts a day, or
For
how many posts a week?
For me, well, when I had somebody who was helping coach me when I got going on TikTok, and they were telling me you need to post 3 to 5 times a day, and I'm like, okay, I don't think anybody has time to post 3 to 5 times a day. My goal was to post once a day, at least Monday through Friday. I wasn't always posting on Sunday, um, but I think if somebody is posting 3 to 4 times a week, that's good. Maybe start there. I would post more than once a week, but. Um, so I would say 3 to 5 times a week is a good place to start.
And how much time does it take you to prepare a post generally?
Sometimes on the fly. Sometimes it's no time. Sometimes I'll just a verse will pop in my head, or I will hear something, see something, or I'll write it down. I'll do a screenshot, like, "Hey, that's a great verse." If I get a verse on the day on my phone, like, you know what, I'm going to unpack that a little bit. Um, it just takes as long to do the video. And I would say, when it comes to TikTok and Instagram, 1 to 3 minute reels, and now YouTube has YouTube Shorts. I post it on all of them. I keep it under 3 minutes. With TikTok, you can go up to 10 minutes, but you usually lose people with longer posts. So I would stick between 1 and 2 minutes. So if you, I mean, obviously most people are pastors or leaders, so you can take a scripture and you can talk about it for 60 seconds. It's just a matter of taking the time to set up your phone and record it, and then you can edit it. CapCut is a great tool, a practical tool. I would recommend CapCut to add captions to it. I found when I add captions, and you don't have to do this, but I found that it seems to extend your reach a little bit, because there are a lot of times where people will they'll lay in bed with their phone muted, and they'll read captions. If you have captions, um, they're not going to skip over yours. So that's something to think about as well. So, I mean, I can record, edit, and post a video within 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah. So, but 10 to 15 minutes, as you just talked about, is significant in a day, right? I
Right.
mean, for my days, 10, 15 minutes, if I spend that much time on something, it was significant to me. Uh, so if somebody was to do it well, what I hear you saying is it might take you an hour a week to do it well.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And I think an hour of work, an hour a week to help people, to see people engage, to connect, to build community, to start establishing even an online relationship with somebody who lives in your area. They might watch you for 6 months and then finally come. And there's been several times where I've been in my lobby after church and I'll say, how did you hear about Rock Church? And someone will say, well, I've been watching you on TikTok. And I decided to come.
Uh,
So, you know, we can just go on and on. It's just another tool that we didn't have years ago. It doesn't have to replace community, but it's definitely a entry point to community.
right. And it is a source of community. I mean,
Yeah.
for instance, we have three big mission partners. One of them is leading a network of 10,000 churches in India, and another one has homes for lepers and homes for girls that have been through all kind of unspeakable horrors, and he's healing their lives and he's helping their lives. And then there's a guy in Poland who has a desire to launch something that causes there to be really great churches across Poland. Man, in the old days, what do you do? Jump on a plane to go see them, right? Or
Right.
even old enough that the telephone call could be real expensive. When I was a missionary in Africa, it cost me a lot of money to talk to anybody. But nowadays, I can just go home and it's 7 in the morning in India and it's whatever 7:30 or whatever here, and we can just sit and talk about what he's going through. And it's just to me uh, I mean, it's just beautiful what we can do. And so that kind of the fellowship I'm having with you right now doesn't feel significantly less because we're not in the same room. It doesn't come across to me that way. Now, I do enjoy seeing you at a conference, and I understand the value of being together. I'm just saying that for people that hear the time commitment that you're talking about, why do I give an hour a week? Because if you give it an hour a week, then all the other questions you have, like how do I use CapCut? How do I do this? Well, if you give it an hour a week, you'll start figuring all that stuff out, right? It's not that hard.
Right. Yes, it's pretty easy. And I think, um, I'm going to share scripture. Luke chapter 14, verse 23 says, go into the country lanes and behind the hedges and urge anyone you find to come so that the house will be full. So when I read that scripture, that verse reminds me that I'm not called to sit back and hope people walk into my church.
Yeah.
I'm not called to sit back and hope that people find Jesus. I'm commanded to go after them. So in today's world in 2025, the country lanes and hedges include Facebook feeds, Instagram reels, YouTube shorts, live
Good,
streams,
good.
podcasts. And I've heard pastors say, I don't like that. Well, if you want to reach more people, we have to at least be open because habits have changed. And if we don't adapt, we risk missing the people we're called to reach and disciple. So what worked in 2000 doesn't work in 2025, and that's not compromise. It's wisdom. So again, we don't change the message; we change our method. Even our executive pastor, Pastor Jim, he lives in Missouri. I'm pastor in Illinois. Our executive pastor lives in Missouri. During COVID, he moved. We kept him on staff because we learned about Zoom during COVID, and he's a part of our staff meeting every week on a TV in our office. Our staff still report to him. And even though he's in Missouri, it feels like he is still at our church every week. Even though we don't physically see him, usually once a quarter he comes to town, but we still have that relationship. It's
Yeah,
still it's
we have
still
staff
real.
members. Of course,
Yeah,
when people have babies, I mean, it makes it a lot easier, right? Because they can stay
right.
home, they can zoom into staff meetings,
Yeah,
and we have some staff that aren't in Texas either. So I totally agree with you. I think really The reason I want to talk about traction in your community, that there are people that you're not reaching if you don't dedicate some time to this, and there are connections that aren't forming in your church if you're not dedicating time to this. The reason I wanted to say that is because the ultimate question is, why do I want to spend the hour a week? Why do I want to do that? And that's why, those two things. There's traction you're not making because you're not committing an hour a week, and there are connections that your people aren't experiencing if we don't learn to treat this as a valid ministry in our church. I think honestly, I remember the days when there were a lot of people against it, and I hope I don't hurt anybody's feelings. But unless you're really set in your ways, I don't know a lot of people against it anymore. I'll just say,
Right,
most people,
right.
they're not against it. They're just kind of toying with whether they make the commitment to it or not. And
Mm.
this is what kind of me over the edge on it is. I've joked with my two sons who are both pastors, and I said to them, there are times on Easter that your dad came and he felt like he knocked it out of the park. And I would come back next week and I think, where are these people?
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
so many. Where'd they go? And I said, but the positive side is there are times on Easter your dad preached, and I thought, I thought that was going to come out better. And I came back and there were still a whole lot of people there. And I
Right.
said, the reality is, it's just how people live. And what I admire about what I hear you saying is that you're starting with where people live and what their expectations are and how you can move them into a relationship with God instead of starting with something that is just going to judge them for something that maybe there are legitimate reasons to judge people, but it's not helping, right? It's not getting people to move towards a dynamic relationship with Christ. So that's what I just encourage anybody listening today is just sit down and think about the cost of it. It's going to cost me about an hour a week to do it right. Okay. And then ask yourself, but what area do I desire to have more traction? And I'm not thinking about a worldwide ministry. I'm just thinking about the woman at the well and people that I can legitimately share with them what's been so life changing to me through social media. So, where can traction increase? Then the second thing, how can connection increase? And I'm talking to you about things that we're getting ready to go into planning season after Easter. And I'm talking about things we're not even doing yet, but I want to do better because I recognize that connection can really form so much stronger if we do it. One thing I learned, Chuck, this would be interesting to hear your thoughts, is that if you want your stuff to be noticed on Google, you really have to think about how you word your sermons, right? Or how you word things because uh, sometimes we can be cute, right? So if we're
Right.
preaching on faith, we may say, uh, getting out of the boat. Well, if somebody Googles getting out of the boat, they're going to learn how to get out of a boat. They're not going to learn. They're not going to learn how to walk by faith. So I literally am starting. I haven't mastered this, but I'm starting to look. I'm starting to Google words into my YouTube account before I actually title the sermon, so that I'm thinking about people who are online and who might get help down the road. But just because I made the title a little bit different. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think titles matter, period. Especially in the digital world. The title has become the thumbnail too. So especially if your church is posting your sermons on on YouTube, for example, I think it's best to, when we've just recently started doing this, we're replacing the thumbnail. It doesn't just show our sermon series graphic. Like, for example, we're in a series right now called No Condemnation. It's a red graphic with the words in real big, no condemnation. That is not the thumbnail that we use on YouTube. It's what we use in house. It's on the screen when we're promoting the services. In house, people know we're in this series. But when it comes um, to YouTube, we know, okay, the title is it's the thumbnail. That's the hook. So it's the front door to the message. So if the door doesn't feel relevant, people aren't going to knock on the door. So I have to remember, I'm not just titling sermons for the room anymore, like what's exactly what you're saying, Pastor Jim. We're titling for the scroll. So while something like step out of the boat might work well in the room, in the house, someone online is going to scroll right past it or end up learning Like, what's it mean to step out of a boat, right? So we have to know that if we add a subtitle, we can we can speak to maybe whatever they're feeling. So, for example, like our series, instead of our thumbnail on YouTube saying "No Condemnation Part 2," it says Jesus wants to help you get unstuck. Or one of the other weeks was "Your mistakes don't define you." We'll take a main point that we drove home in that message and find a way, 5 to 8 words, that's going to hook somebody as as they're scrolling. So lead with empathy, title with clarity, make it about them. It's not about my church. Hey, you need to come to my church. It's about them. Just like I've told somebody when they ask me about the books that the last book that I wrote, I should say, I published. I'm not writing a book about something. I'm writing a book to someone. So we have to
That's
think of
awesome.
that. Okay, this message,
That is so good.
yeah, it's not just about um, what we want to say, but we're speaking to people. So if we make it about them, we can't go wrong.
And my father-in-law used to say, don't preach sermons, deliver messages. Give people messages from God. Hey, God wants you to hear this, you know. And I love that, starting with empathy, because when we come to the throne of God's grace, what do we receive? Mercy, and then help, then grace to help. And if you're just giving people help, but they don't feel the mercy and they don't see how it connects with them, then you're wasting a lot of good hours where you found some good content. But when you empathize and you connect, it's obviously, just so much more helpful. Well, this has been fantastic, and I know that I'm motivated. I know a lot of people who are listening today are really motivated. Is there anything else you want to say about the subject before we?
I will say the last thing I'll say is recently we know that NASA brought home a couple of astronauts that had been stranded at the International Space Station for like 9 months. And I don't know if you saw this, Pastor Jim, but one of the astronauts, his name is Butch Wilmore. He said, despite being 250 miles above Earth, he remained spiritually connected to his church by streaming their online services while in space. So from his home church, Providence Baptist Church in Pasadena, Texas, and Grace Baptist Church in
Oh
Mount Juliet,
my
Tennessee.
goodness! Say that again. That
So
that is unbelievable.
yeah, so
I
uh,
didn't hear that.
yeah, so NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore, while he was in space for 9 months, continued to remain spiritually connected to a couple churches by streaming their online services. His home church, which is Providence Baptist Church in Pasadena, and Grace Baptist Church in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. So he described this virtual fellowship as vital, invigorating, emphasizing that worshiping with his church family, even in space, was essential to his well-being during that time. So I think that example underscores that digital ministry, it's not just a convenience, it's a lifeline.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I want to just connect and empathize with people and say, yeah, it's a lifeline, but man, sometimes I feel like everything in the world's pulling people away from gathering. I want you to know we get that as we close, that we feel the same way you do about that. And I get that. But the reality is, when I first started pastoring, 95% of your people who were members would gather on a Sunday. Today, it's closer to 68% for a number of reasons. There's more brokenness. Kids are going back and forth places. And I know that Sundays and even Wednesday nights and even Sundays aren't sacred like they used to be. So I get the difficulty of all that. But I do think that the reality is we got to reach people where they're at. And things are going to change, and they're never going to come back to the way that they were. I know some of you would laugh about this in maybe the late 90s, when we'd say, well, some people would have a great church if it was 1983, but they didn't come up to the late 1990s. Well, I don't want to be the guy who in the 2020s is having church like I did in 2005, 2010. I want to be able to be what people need us to be. So I hope this was helpful. Hey, like always, we really appreciate whenever you connect with us and let us know how we can help you. We encourage you, hey, make this a lunch appointment with us. We bring food, and I'm always going to try to bring people I know you'd love going to lunch with. They've helped me, so I know they can help you whenever we spend a little bit of time together. Also, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube page, man, if you do it, it helps us tell sponsors there's some people that maybe are worth investing in on their behalf. So if you've never done that, you may want to consider doing that. We'd certainly appreciate it if you did. Chuck, any final words before we all head off into our Good Friday and Easter services?
I guess the last thing is I just want to encourage pastors. I mean, I'm preaching to myself too, and I need to do a better job. I don't have all the answers, but I always come back to 1 Corinthians chapter 9, where Paul says, I've become all things to all people, that by all possible means I might save some. Some is worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, this is kind of a funny thought, but in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about how to solve conflicts on your teams because it's Easter. And if you guys are like us, we're mobilizing everything that moves to try to serve somewhere this weekend to handle our biggest crowd of the year. And we used to do musical dramas. We still do. We're still creative, but we don't do them the same way we used to because times have kind of changed. But there were times we'd have, 6, 7,000 people in a city of 60,000 who would come to our musical drama. And sometimes I would wonder when we got done, did we reach more people or did we cause more conflict within our congregation putting on this event? And so solving conflict among your members is a real issue. And we're going to look forward to talking about that in 2 weeks. But know we're with you this weekend. Man, in our hearts, we're cheering you on. Would love to hear about your Easter weekend. If you put something out, add us to your list of people who know what's going on. And thank you for all you do. Together, we can see God do great things.